we were discussing some things this morning, and you stumbled across a story or a talking head or someone.
Yeah, it was a take from a talking head. We can leave it at that. That's not important because this conversation actually comes up a lot in sports. Mm-hmm. He said that college football is better when these teams are playing at the highest level. He listed Florida, Michigan, Texas, Nebraska. I don't know how old this guy is. USC, Notre Dame, Florida State, Miami, Auburn, and Penn State. The sentiment is college football is better when teams like that are at the top of the sport.
You would be okay with the whale unless your name is Jonah.
I get it. I understand.
So college football is better when Blue Buds are good.
Essentially.
That's the premise.
I don't agree with Nebraska being in that conversation because I'm 30 years old. Nebraska has never been good in my life.
Okay,
never been good.
So college football is better when teams with historical significance are good.
That's not true. They played for a national title in 2001. Got smoked, but they played for it.
I was 9.
Sorry. It was in your lifetime. It was in your lifetime.
Wait, Nebraska played for a title in 2001?
No,
got smoked by Miami.
Yeah.
How's Eric Crouch's senior year when he won the Heisman?
That was the end.
You're right.
That was the end.
You're right about that. So you have a problem with this take, Borky.
I do. Because I don't believe it. I don't believe it to be true. Two things that I thought of. First, it's not college football, but it's still a really good example. What are the Buffalo Bills to the NFL? A laughingstock, mostly, right? They're famous for losing Super Bowls a long, long time ago, and after that have been very bad. Very, very bad. And a bad market, very small city. They're only... Up until recently, they've only been popular because their fans break tables, pour mustard on themselves, and go shirtless at their snow games. The Buffalo Bills, in most of my lifetime, have been pretty pathetic. And it's a very small market. But the Bills-Chiefs game last year delivered a massive rating, one of the most watched games that was not the Super Bowl in the history of all sports. And it was one of the most compelling matchups. One of the most compelling games I've ever watched. Would it have been any better if it was the Steelers instead of the Bills? In my opinion, no. I don't think what the name on the uniform or the logo on the helmet does enhances the product in any way, in my opinion. And then the second thing I thought of was this past season. Because he lists Florida, right? When a team is not good, generally somebody else has to be good in their place. Not everybody in the SEC, for example, can be good. Not everybody can be bad. There are wins and losses that have to get passed around. Florida was not a good football team last year. That's why they fired their coach. They were quite bad. Traditional power Florida was bad. Non-traditional power, Ole Miss was good. Very good. Interesting. They played in big-time games that had a lot of people watch them. They had a game in the most tense environment that, you may have ever been in your life. They were compelling. They were fun. They were interesting. They played great football. Why should I think that would have been better and more enjoyable if they had an F on their helmet instead of the script Ole Miss? Why does... for you, hey Dad, it's different. But why is it better if it's Florida? If we get a good, compelling, fun team who's still playing in a big conference, by the way. It's not like this was, I'm not trying to sell you on Coastal Carolina. I'm not naive. I'm not trying to sell you on them. But you had a team that played in the SEC West that is not a traditional power, that won 10 games for the first time in its program's regular season history. And they were what Florida is supposed to be last year. And it was a fun, compelling, interesting product. Why would it be enhanced based on a different uniform? That's the kind of thing I don't get. As long as you have good, compelling, fun, interesting teams, I don't care what the program's history is. I just care that we have fun, compelling, interesting teams that are playing big games in big environments. And that was Ole Miss last year. Was college football worse because the team from the SEC that won 10 games and went to the Sugar Bowl was Ole Miss instead of Florida? I don't agree with that.
Well, one thing to remember is two things can be true, right? Florida can still be good when Ole Miss is good. I mean, you can have that interesting story of Ole Miss coming out of nowhere to be 10-2 and being one of the top teams in the country, and Florida can still have its place among the elite. I also would tell you that having a program like Florida suddenly collapse is a good story. Florida coming out of nowhere last year to be as bad as they were, coming off of a SEC East championship series, that's good. That's good content for us. That's good drama. That's good storylines. But at the same time, I also agree that just like think of it like a superhero movie, right? Like you go to a superhero movie nowadays, you want to see Batman and Superman. You want to see the top guys, right? If we start a superhero movie about a character you don't know a lot about, you're not as invested. You're not as invested as you normally would be, as you are in the names that you know.
Yeah, I largely disagree with everything you said, Borky.
Good.
We'll talk about is our traditional blue bloods, our historically significant college football programs being good or needing to be good important for the game? Is college football better when those teams are good? And you make an argument as to how many of those teams are. And Borky says no, because, why does Florida being bad but Ole Miss being good last year, why does that make college football worse? And I don't even know that the argument is that makes it worse. And I'm not going to argue against Ole Miss being good, being bad for college football. I think it's cool because Ole Miss was a fun team with good storylines and compelling stuff out there, right? Starting with Lane Kiffin and going to Matt Corral and, good environments and, kind of being the villain in some cases, Lane Kiffin being the villain. So, yeah, that had great storylines to it. I'm not debating that or even disagreeing with that. I do, however, think that, for example, Tennessee being good makes college football more fun. And I think there's a difference in being good and being able to compete for a national championship. I'm not saying that Florida, Michigan, Texas, Nebraska, Tennessee, Southern Cal, Notre Dame, Florida State, Miami, Auburn, Penn State, et cetera, all have to be in the running for a national title. But Florida State being a dumpster fire, that's not great for college football. Tennessee just writhing in mediocrity, I don't think that's good for college football. Southern Cal being as unimportant as they have been since Pete Carroll left, not great for college football. But when we say college football, what are we talking about? We're talking about, or at least I'm talking about, the level of interest in college football across the entire country. Not just in a 10-state footprint in the southeastern portion of the country with a couple of slivers in the upper Midwest. To me, that's the difference. And if you want the West Coast to engage, Southern Cal needs to be good. And somebody else probably needs to be good, whether that's Washington or Oregon or one of the Arizona teams or Colorado popping up. Or if you move a little farther to the middle of the country, Michigan doesn't need to be terrible. Michigan bouncing back last year, I think, had a lot to do with a massive ratings bump for Fox in that 11 o'clock time slot, because it wasn't just you stick Ohio State there. There was another team that you could stick into that time slot that was compelling and people watched.
And Michigan State was a top 10 team last year, too. So they had three.
They were, but I don't think Michigan State is the draw that Michigan is. Not nationally.
They aren't, but again, they do have a national audience, and just to have a third team in that mix. I mean, Michigan State beat Michigan last year.
They did.
That got people interested in Michigan State.
So ultimately,
a non-traditional power playing well was interesting and got people paying attention.
But that's interesting. But of course, it's the same thing. It's two things can be true.
Yes,
It's
thank you.
interesting to have having an Ole Miss, having a Michigan State, having an Oklahoma State be really good is good for college football. But at the same time, having your biggest brands is good for college football as well.
Here's where I would thread the needle on this. I want my cake and I want to eat it too. It's not that an Ole Miss story or a Michigan State story or an Oklahoma State or an Iowa State being good is bad for college football. I think all of those things are not just good, but are great for the health and the growth of the game. But having those big brands be good also, that's where I want to see it. See, again, a little bit of a tightrope here, right? I don't want the same four teams in the college football playoff every year. I'm tired of Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Oklahoma. I really am. But that doesn't mean that I want those four teams to fall off the map, right? I'd be okay with those teams being like one win less good, so it's not just an automatic shoe-in that they're there. See, to me, the perfect
just to move
scenario,
around a little bit.
Yeah.
Just to have a year where Alabama's 10-2 and they take a little bit of a step back, and that's a year maybe Texas A&M or Ole Miss or Mississippi State leaps up. That's exciting. Alabama every year is not exciting, but Alabama consistently being good is good for college football.
So the perfect scenario for me would be the playoff that we had last year, which was who? Right? It was Alabama and Georgia and Michigan and who was the fourth? Cincinnati. All right, so those are the four teams you have last year.
That's a good playoff.
That's a good playoff. So what if this year Georgia takes a step back, and so your playoff is Alabama, Ohio State, Southern Cal, and Clemson? That'd be a good playoff. But I don't want to see those same four teams next year. And next year, when Bryce Young goes to the NFL, maybe Alabama takes a half a step back. And maybe it's Michigan and Tennessee, and let's say Mississippi State in Will Rogers' junior year finds its way into the playoff, and who?
Senior year.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, you get the point. And maybe Miami joins the party. And then the year after that, maybe Alabama is back in it, and Ole Miss has a cycle up, and they make it to the playoff. And to me, okay, so let's make all of this make sense in the college football world we're living in right now. This is the biggest beauty of the 12-team playoff. Do the same teams likely still win the national title? Yeah, in the short term, I would agree. Probably so. But a 12-team playoff gets more fan bases involved. It gets more people interested because you've got different parts of the country involved. It gives the opportunity for teams that aren't in that top four, but they're in that very close knocking on the door. It's hard for them to get to the top four, but they're just behind that into the mix. And if that happens consistently, and from a recruiting standpoint, you say, hey, we're getting to the playoff. We just got into the 12-team playoff 2 out of the last 5 years. Theoretically, that gives you a recruiting bump. And once you bump your recruiting for 3 or 4 years in a row, now you've got a team that is more equipped to compete with those teams at the top. So again, going back to kind of where it is, I know there's a lot of words in all of this. It's not that I think atypical participants, atypical teams being good is bad. It's just I don't think that you need traditional teams to be bad at the same time.
Just different strokes, I guess. And I agree with the idea that having good teams spread out across the country is ideal. That's the NFL. The NFL has good teams scattered everywhere. That's the beauty of that league is you don't have a hyper focus on one region. They've avoided that, and that's a great thing. Why would it enhance my experience if Florida State's good? That's what I can't admit. I'm just different. Why do I need Florida State to be good to enjoy college football more? They don't do anything.
Let me ask you this, and maybe it's because you're younger than me and Richard. But what sounds like a bigger game? Number 1 Clemson versus number 3 Florida State, or number 1 Clemson versus number 3 Wake Forest?
They are the same. I mean, it's two of
So
the
they're
top
not the
five
same to
teams.
me.
Nope,
But
They're not the same to me.
That's fine, but I only care about the teams being good. Is it going to be a good game and a cool atmosphere? That's fine. I don't care if Florida State won the national championship in 1996 or not. That moves no needle for me. I mean, now maybe the casual
more recently.
They Jameis Winston.
They have a recent national title.
The Saints quarterback won it, and the Heisman too.
Yeah, that's right.
But no, that just doesn't move a needle for me. I mean, Clemson was nothing before 2011. I mean, Clemson.
I think you know what another problem is.
I think it's an age thing.
That's part of it.
I think it's an age thing. I think because we grew up in a time where Florida State year in, year out was one of the top programs in the country. So when I see them playing a game and they've got a number 3 next to their name, I'm like, okay, that's got to be a huge game. Yeah. Whereas if I see Wake Forest, I'm like, fun story, but they're going to get killed.
See, I got another reason that Clemson-Florida State is a more fun matchup than Clemson against Wake Forest. We'll get to that when we come back. Sports Talk Mississippi streaming at supertalk.fm. So another reason that I prefer the idea of Florida State versus Clemson, number 1 Clemson versus number 3 Florida State, than number 1 Clemson versus number 3 Wake Forest. That was the example that you guys used. Michael Borky said makes no difference to him. He just wants to see a good game between two good teams. Haydad said it's an age thing because we grew up seeing Florida State relevant. That's a more attractive matchup. I hear what both of you are saying, but when I'm watching a big game, there's another element that's important to me. And you can tell me this is stupid, that the only thing that matters is what happens on the field. I need to see big fan bases that are engaged.
Yeah.
And if I've got number 1 Clemson against Wake Forest in a championship game setting, I got 45,000 Clemson fans there that are either clad in orange and purple, and I've got a really excited group of Wake Forest fans, and there's 6,000 of them there. And that is far less compelling for me to watch than if I've got 45,000 Clemson fans on one side clad in orange, and I've got 45,000 Florida State fans clad in garnet and gold that are tomahawk chopping the whole time. Because that's a better product for me to view.
Well, in
terms of the overall atmosphere.
Using the smallest alumni base in college football is probably not the best example in this exercise because North Carolina would fill it up or Virginia Tech would.
That's a brand. North Carolina's a brand. Virginia Tech's a brand.
When have they ever been... But are they a brand? If that's what we're talking about.
Again, to my demographic, Virginia Tech has played for a national title. They had Mike Vick there. They were a consistent 10-win program for, 2 decades? Yeah.
When I think Virginia Tech, I think unbelievable atmosphere inside Lane Stadium with Enter Sandman and Mike Vick. That's what I think.
And that exists across college football absent the Blue Bloods. Nobody in their right mind would argue Virginia Tech is a blue blood program. Not a single person would ever argue that.
No, but they're still a good program, and they have a historical significance, is what I would say. When you think about this matchup here, though,
exist
right
all over college.
I mean, think about the game comes in, and it's whoever the announcer is. And they're at Wake Forest, and the fans are excited, and that's great, and I'm sure to be a fine backdrop for college football. But then it's the difference of looking, you're looking live at Doak Campbell, and it's 70,000 Florida State fans, and that band is cranking out the war chant, and everybody's tomahawk chopping. That is a spectacle that you can't replicate with a non-brand name.
All right, so for example,
it's just not the same.
I was pleasantly surprised with how many Baylor fans were at the Sugar Bowl. I did not expect it. I know there was somebody that told me you're going to be blown away. I didn't expect it. I was pleasantly surprised. But the previous Sugar Bowl when Ole Miss played Oklahoma State's fan base was, and that's a decent fan base that cares a lot. It was not impressive. But if you told me, hey, would you rather have Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl against Baylor or Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl against Michigan, and what that's going to look like in the stands, I'd rather have that big environment, big brand, big feel than just you got there.
Sure. And just the implication that there's not great atmospheres that can enhance an environment across the country, I think is crazy. Bedlam was an absolute zoo last year. It was nuts. It was an insane place to play. But Oklahoma State, who cares if because they're just Oklahoma State. It doesn't matter if they're good or not because that's not good for college football. Then maybe it's a coverage problem because a game in Stillwater, Oklahoma, that has stakes is an absolute zoo, and the fans are on top of the rivalry game. Though they do it with big home games too. It just there are
great atmospheres, and there are greater atmospheres. And as great as the atmosphere is at Oklahoma State, it will never be better than the best atmosphere at LSU. Never, under any circumstances.
Okay, but USC's this national brand that we have to protect at all costs. Do they have a great home environment?
I don't say we have to protect them.
No.
When that place is filled up, it can be great, but it's also an 85,000 seat stadium.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's such a huge stadium. It's tough, it's not a great venue for college football.
There's just so much great in college football that does not get anywhere close to the attention that it deserves because it's not a blue blood. And that's frustrating to me.
But think about Kentucky last year with those back-to-back games. People raved about what that environment was like. I feel like people recognize when an environment is good.
Hopefully they're starting to, because Kentucky's not a traditional power that college football is bad if Florida's not good, but Kentucky is. That place is a zoo. And it's a good program, and you've got this idea that, we need Florida to be good or else college football is not interesting. What is not interesting about this Kentucky team? Look at their schedule. There's a chance that they're playing Georgia for the SEC East, and it's just like, it's just Kentucky. But they've got a lot of good things going for it, and we just dismiss them because they didn't win 20 years ago. I don't like that sentiment.
When Mississippi State fans show up, Davis Wade is as good as it gets. Yes. He hasn't been showing up for the last couple of years.